According to recent reports, Social Security benefits are projected to be cut by almost 20% within the next 10 years if no changes are made to the system. And while I'm not going to talk about potential solutions to this issue, what I am going to talk about is what each of us as individuals should be doing with our own planning to ensure we have contingencies in place for if and when this type of a cut happens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize the three main things that we need to do high level, and then I'm going to walk us through an example to see how can we apply this framework to our own situation to make sure that we have plans in place to address the possibility of Social Security not just being cut, but being cut by a fairly dramatic amount. So let's jump right into the things that you can do to prepare for this. The first thing that you need to do, number one, is you need to understand what percentage of your income is discretionary. Number two, you need to determine what percentage of your income either already does or is projected to come from Social Security. And number three, you need to understand what your projected portfolio withdrawal rate is going to be in retirement. So what on earth do those things have to do with planning for Social Security being cut? I'm going to get to that in just a second, but let's walk through an example to illustrate how this is the case. Let's look at an example of a couple that wants to spend $8,000 per month in retirement. Whether your number is higher or lower does not matter. Choose a number that works. I'm going to walk you through this using $8,000 per month as an example. Well, they look at their budget and they say, okay, some of these things that we're spending money on, they're non-negotiables. We have to pay them. We can't skip our property tax payment. We can't not pay for food. We can't not pay for utilities. We can't not pay for the things that we can do to live. Not to travel, not to do a whole bunch of discretionary extra things, but the core basic living expenses represent about 80% of our budget. We call it $6,400 per month. The remaining 20%, or the remaining $1,600, that's discretionary. We don't want to cut it, but if we had to, we could. Now, the goal is not to cut that, and I don't want you to think ahead of, oh my gosh, if Social Security gets cut, I have to cut out my discretionary expenses. We're not going there yet, but you do need to know this number ahead of time because we're going to circle back to it later to address potential contingencies. So that's step one. Understand what percentage of your expenses are discretionary. In our example, this couple wants to spend $8,000 per month, 20% or $1,600 of that is discretionary. Step number two is to understand what percentage of that income is going to come from Social Security. So in this example, let's assume that this couple has a combined Social Security benefit of $3,200 per month. Well, $3,200 per month represents 40% of $8,000. So what does that mean? Of the $8,000 per month that's coming in, 40% of that, $3,200, is going to come from Social Security benefits. The other 60%, aka the other $4,800, that's what needs to come from their portfolio. So keep that number in mind. When we look at the $8,000 per month, sometimes that's daunting. Geez, does that need to all come from our portfolio, or do I need to generate a Social Security benefit that can get almost there? No, it's typically some combination of the two. In this specific example that we're looking at, 40% of that number is being made up of Social Security benefits. The other 60% is coming from this couple's portfolio. So that's the second thing that you need to look at. The third thing that you need to look at is what would your portfolio withdrawal rate be under these conditions? What conditions are those? Well, the condition in this example that you need to take out $4,800 per month from your portfolio. So let's take that $4,800 per month. That's what they need to take out on a monthly basis. On an annual basis, that comes out to $57,600 per year. So $57,600 per year, what does that represent as a portfolio withdrawal rate? Well, we don't know. We only know half the equation so far. To get to the full equation, we need to understand how much they have in their portfolio. Let's assume that this couple has $1 million in their portfolio, to use a nice round number. Well, if that's the case, their portfolio withdrawal rate is 5.76% per year. That's $57,600 divided by $1 million, 5.76%. So on the higher side for sure, and we're going to come back to that in a second. But what we've done so far was we haven't talked about strategy. We haven't talked about how this couple is going to address Social Security benefits being cut. All we've done is paint the picture of understanding what percentage of their expenses are discretionary, step number one. Number two, understand what percentage of their total income is coming from Social Security. And then finally, number three, what is their core portfolio withdrawal rate as it stands today? So now let's walk through an example of what this couple can do to prepare for what happens when Social Security benefits get cut, if that ends up being the case. Here's step number one. The first step that you want to look at is you almost want to work backwards from what we just looked at. We just looked at portfolio withdrawal rates as being step three here. But the first thing I want to look at for a couple or an individual, wherever the case might be, asking, are we going to be okay when Social Security gets cut, if Social Security gets cut? The first thing I want to look at is I want to understand what is your portfolio withdrawal rate today with Social Security, and do we potentially have margin to increase that if Social Security is cut? Because, for example, let's assume that you are retired and you're doing everything that you want to do. Life is good. You're able to spend everything you want to spend, and we knew for certain Social Security was going to be cut. Well, some of your income is coming in from Social Security, some of it is coming from your portfolio. Are you automatically in a bad position if Social Security gets cut? Well, you're going to be in a worse position than you otherwise would have been, but not necessarily a bad position overall. Here's what I mean by that. What if you have a portfolio that you're only taking a couple percent per year out of? Maybe you have $1 million portfolio, you're only taking 2% per year, and if Social Security was cut, it would mean you're losing $10,000 per year of benefits. That's a lot of money. $10,000 just going out the door. Well, you have a portfolio called $1 million that you're taking $20,000 per year from, and that combined with Social Security is allowing you to do everything that you want to do. Well, Social Security gets cut and $10,000 is reduced, but you're only taking $20,000 out of $1 million portfolio. That's a 2% withdrawal rate. You could easily increase that to 3%, and assuming that you're invested the right way, be reasonably assured that that portfolio is going to last a good amount of time for you. So is it ideal that Social Security was cut? No, of course not. Of course you don't want that to happen. Of course you don't want to lose $10,000 of benefits in this arbitrary example. But you have margin to increase your portfolio to offset that. So that's why you want to start with what I'm calling your base portfolio withdrawal rate. What would that withdrawal rate look like if and when you still have Social Security? And then do you have the ability to increase that? Do you have margin to increase that if Social Security is later decreased? If you do have margin, meaning if you could simply increase your portfolio withdrawal rate to offset a 20% reduction, a 30% reduction in Social Security benefits, you're probably good. Going back to that couple that we were talking about, that's taking $4,800 per month from their portfolio and $3,200 per month from Social Security, they don't have a whole lot of margin. They're already at a 5.76% withdrawal rate. I'm just going to say 5.8% to round it. They're already taking 5.8% per year from their portfolio. That's very much on the high end of things. In fact, it's high enough that I might not even be comfortable with them taking that amount out if they're getting the full Social Security benefit and we knew that was going to continue. So the fact that they're already there, that tells me this couple doesn't have much margin to offset a reduction in Social Security with a simple increase in portfolio withdrawals. So that's why any solution should look at this first. Start with your withdrawals and understand, do you have margin to offset a reduction by just taking more from your portfolio? If yes, you're probably in a good spot. And it's not ideal for Social Security to be cut, but we have no control over what happens there. What we do have control over is, could we offset any negative effects of that simply by dipping into our portfolio more? If yes, great. If no, let's move to the second step. The second step is looking again at how much you have in discretionary expenses. So as I talked about before, as we started going through the 3 things that you need to know, the first thing is, what are your discretionary expenses? We used a couple that's spending $8,000 per month. 20% of that, or $1,600 per month, is discretionary expenses. Now, they don't want to give that up. No one wants to give that up, but if they had to, they could. If they had to, they could give it up, and it didn't mean they would have to move out of their home. It wouldn't mean they wouldn't be able to eat. It wouldn't mean they wouldn't be able to put gas in their car or food on their table. They would still be able to survive. They just wouldn't be able to live the same lifestyle that they otherwise wanted to. So what we want to do specifically here isn't just say, okay, do you have discretionary expenses and could you potentially change them? We want to understand, how do those discretionary expenses compare to a potential reduction in benefits? So for this couple, if their discretionary expenses are 20% of their overall spend, that's $1,600 per month. What I want to know first is, $1,600 per month represents what percentage of their total Social Security benefit? Well, if their total Social Security benefit is $3,200 per month, and their discretionary spend is $1,600 per month, what that tells me is that their discretionary spend represents 50% of what they're getting from Social Security. So in other words, if Social Security was cut up to 50%, they would still be okay from the standpoint that they would still survive. They would still be able to live. They'd be able to do the things they need to do without making dramatic changes to their lifestyle, but they wouldn't be able to do the fun things. They wouldn't be able to do the discretionary things. Again, when I'm saying okay, I'm not saying, oh, this is okay, you should be fine with this. No, what I'm saying is we need to understand, what is a non-negotiable? What are those expenses that we cannot afford to have cut? And what are those things that are not ideal? And we do not choose to have them cut. But if something outside of our control happens, we know what those are ahead of time. Well, in this couple's case, they could afford for Social Security to be cut by up to 50% before they would have to make some really dramatic changes to their life. Because if Social Security was cut by 50%, that ends up being a 20% overall reduction to their income. $3,200 per month is their total Social Security benefit. Half of that is $1,600 per month. $1,600 per month is 20% of their overall spend. That also happens to be what their discretionary expenses are. Another way of looking at this is saying, okay, well, what if Social Security is cut by 25%? Half of the 50. Well, in that case, this couple would have to give up half of their discretionary spending. So this is one way of looking at it. We don't want to give up discretionary spending, but by having this plan ahead of time, it allows you to be prepared. It allows you to say, okay, if something outside my control happens in the future, I'm not going to make a knee-jerk reaction. I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to have to go start planning then. I'm going to go into this with eyes wide open of understanding what contingencies exist, what changes would I make to my plan when that happened, as opposed to being caught off guard when it did. So here's what this couple should do now. They've looked at their discretionary expenses. They've seen how that compares to Social Security and what a potential reduction in Social Security would do. The next step is to ask themselves, are they okay with that? Are you okay with potentially all of your discretionary expenses being cut if Social Security is reduced by 50% or part of it being cut? If the answer is no, that's perfectly fair. My feedback to them would be, you're not yet in a position where you can retire. You need to keep working. You need to keep saving. You need to keep investing. You need to keep increasing your Social Security benefit, because even if Social Security is reduced in the future, it's likely to be a proportional reduction or a percentage reduction. It's not one of those things where I don't care if you're making $2,000 per month in benefits or $3,000 per month in benefits, it's completely gone. It's more likely going to be whatever your benefit is, some percentage of that is reduced. And again, this isn't me prognosticating if a benefit cut is going to happen. This is me just saying, if it were to happen, what would need to change on the planning side? So if you look at that and say, we're not willing to give up our discretionary expenses. Sure, they're discretionary, but we're retiring so we can do that. We're retiring because without doing those things, we're not going to feel like we're really living. That is perfectly fine. You just need to understand the trade-off is you're probably not in a position to retire yet. You would need to build your portfolio beyond, in this hypothetical couple's case, $1 million. Keep growing that. Keep increasing your Social Security benefit. Keep doing other things today so that you have more buffer, you have more margin to potentially withstand a downturn, to withstand a cut in your Social Security benefit. So that's step 2. Compare your discretionary expenses to your total Social Security income and ask yourself, are you okay with those discretionary expenses being cut by whatever that reduction would be with Social Security? If the answer is yes, great. Stay the course and just understand that that might be something you have to do. If the answer is no, we would not be okay with doing this, know that you need to continue working. You need to continue doing something else so that you don't have to fully rely on Social Security to meet your discretionary expenses. And then finally, the third step here, and this isn't going to apply to everybody, but for those of you who are saying, look, if Social Security were to be cut, it wouldn't just impact my discretionary expenses, it would impact my core expenses. For example, maybe you have $2,500 per month coming in from Social Security and you have no portfolio. And you say $2,500 per month is what I need to live. There's no discretionary expenses in there. Well, you couldn't look at this and say, okay, well, Social Security was cut by 20%. My $2,500 benefit goes to $2,000 per month. Oh, well, I would just live on $2,000 per month. That's not a luxury you're going to have in that instance. You need all that $2,500 per month to pay for property taxes or rent or food or whatever the expenses might be. So if that's the case, this is one of those things, again, where I'm going to say you're not in a position to where you could afford to retire and solely count on just Social Security to meet all of your needs. That's where you need to add to your savings, add to your investments, continue working, get that $2,500 benefit. I know that's just an example. Your own benefit might be more, might be less, but whatever that benefit is, keep working, keep increasing that, get increases as you keep growing and keep deferring that so that you're in a better position to potentially weather a cut in your Social Security benefit. So unfortunately, there's no silver bullet here. There's no planning point that says, okay, if Social Security is going to be cut, you can just flip this switch over here and you'll be just fine. That's not the reality. Whether you have a lot in your portfolio or a little in your portfolio, everyone uses Social Security to some extent in their retirement planning. And a reduction in Social Security could represent anything from an inconvenience to a major devastating impact to your plan. So going through this exercise ahead of time, understanding the impact of this ahead of time is key to you being able to have a plan today that isn't fully contingent upon everything going perfectly going forward. But you've built in some contingencies. You've built in some what-if scenarios so that you know what steps you need to take if and when something happens to Social Security. Now, if you're watching this and saying, okay, I do want to actually increase my Social Security benefit, what can I do today to maximize what that benefit is so that even if there is a reduction, it's reducing an already higher amount? Well, check out this video right here. In this video, I'll walk you through the 4 simple things you need to know to increase your Social Security benefit so that you can go into retirement with confidence, knowing that you're as prepared as you possibly can be for whatever comes. Root Financial has not provided any compensation for and has not influenced the content of any testimonials and endorsements shown. Any testimonials and endorsements shown have been invited, have been shared with each individual's permission, and are not necessarily representative of the experience of other clients. To our knowledge, no other conflicts of interest exist regarding these testimonials and endorsements. Once again, I'm James Knoll, founder of Root Financial, and if you're interested in seeing how we help our clients at Root Financial get the most out of life with their money, be sure to visit us at www.rootfinancialpartners.com.